All right, welcome back to TechStrong TV live at RSA conference in San Francisco. Coming up now, we have a very, very special edition of the TechStrong Women series that we run on TechStrong TV quite a bit. My co-host Tracy Bannon from MITRE and I are very, very excited to have today's guests. To my immediate right is Charity Wright, who is cyber threat analyst over at Recorded Future.
Recorded Future,
welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I do appreciate it. Good stuff. And then Chris Bondi, who is the CEO of, is it Mimoto or Mimoto? Mimoto. Okay, great. I'm so glad to have you as well. We were all just meeting, and so we just kind of immediately sat down and just started gabbing because that's what we do, because we so enjoy just learning about each other, and because you learn about each other, you learn from each other, and I think that that's so important in this line of work for anybody. It doesn't really matter if you're male or female. Having the conversation is so very important. Wanted to first of all thank everybody here at RSA. So what a great day we've had so far, having conversations and just meeting people and just being here in person. What a great thing. What a great thing. TechStrong Women is a show where we talk about women in IT from the celebratory perspective. We really want to celebrate the successes of women in IT and in cybersecurity, and talking about the collective experience of women in the IT and cybersecurity space. So it's so great to have everybody live and in person. Normally we do this over Zoom, so it's great to have everybody here. I don't have an agenda for this show. I really just want to talk to you guys. I want to learn about you guys. I want to know, where you come from, what you're doing. Tell us about yourself. Charity, why don't you start us? Tell us about what you do as a cyber threat analyst over at Recorded Future and how you got to where you are.
Sure. I'm a threat intel analyst, and I worked within a pretty large research team. And well, first I'll tell you how I got started and how I got into this role. I started in the U.S. Army. I joined to be a linguist, and they assigned me to learn Mandarin Chinese.
Oh, wow.
So I got to spend a couple of years learning Chinese, and then I was stationed at the National Security Agency doing some pretty cool intelligence analysis there. And when I decided to transition out of the military, it's really not really sure, where am I going to go from here? And then I saw some threat intel jobs at cybersecurity companies. And I thought, well, I know nothing about cyber, but it's time to learn, because I really see cyber being the future of intelligence. And so I just jumped into a cyber threat intelligence role. And what we do is, we find out how the hackers are working, how they're getting into our networks, what tactics, techniques, tools they're using. But we're also diving into more than just technical intel. My particular role at Recorded Future involves analyzing Chinese influence operations, disinformation, coordinated, malign, state-sponsored disinfo, and also strategic level intelligence like geopolitics. What are we going to do if China decides to invade Taiwan someday? How does that affect not only governments, but also enterprises around the world? So our clients rely on us for that very, very specific, detailed, actionable intel to help protect themselves and their people.
Well, Charity, with this growing emphasis on influences, how do you influence a people group or a population? I'm really interested if you've been looking at some of the threats that come from the deepfakes. I've seen that from a corporate perspective. We also saw Zelensky's really poorly done deepfake, right, where he's telling his comrades in arms to lay them down. Is that something that you guys are also keeping your eyes on, or the deepfakes?
Absolutely. It's one of the emerging threats that we're keeping a close eye on. And we're trying to create technology and AI that can automatically detect a deepfake photo or video. That way, humans make mistakes. We can miss things. We have bias. So maybe it looks real to us, but there's some technical details in the photo or video that's easier for a computer to detect than it is for us. So that's definitely one of those trends that we're keeping a close eye on.
Well, that's been our final frontier, right? We learned that we couldn't always believe what we heard, but I could, you had to see it with your own eyes.
Right.
Well, now even if you see it with your own eyes, it can't be on a screen. I need to see it with my own eyes. So it's really, really changing that rapidly.
True. It's a challenging area of threats to analyze because a lot of times it involves politics, it involves very sensitive issues, and you're talking about this stuff in the workplace. It can get a little awkward, and also we have to check each other's bias. For example, I'm an American and I served in the U.S. Army and NSA. I work with people from all around the world that have different worldviews and different perspectives on the same subject. And so it's great to have them kind of check me and go, well, you would think that because you're American. And that's fine with me. I'm like, oh, you're right. I never thought about it from this other point of view.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, the diversity, to check these complex emerging threats.
That's definitely something that diversity is definitely something that we will be talking about, and that I want to learn more about, how your organization approaches this and a bias and so many different levels. So
yeah.
Let's put a pin in that and
Yes.
get back to that. But Chris, why don't you tell us about yourself and your organization and how you got to where you are?
So Mimoto analyzes every time a human interacts with the system to be able to, because as we often say, a credential, it's a fallacy to assume a credential is an actual person. And so we are analyzing to know that it is that person or it's not that person, and also contextually bringing that into it. I started as a reporter way long ago, and then moved into, sort of the arc was community, communications, marketing. And the reality is, the secret is I've been doing the same thing all along, which is asking follow-up questions. I was always really good at tech. And so I worked a lot in DevOps and a lot in things that were community building. And it was because I asked follow-up questions. In fact, the thing that I would get scolded for repeatedly is I would always say, I'm not technical. And somebody would be like,
stop. You're technical.
Yeah,
you're more technical than this person, less technical than that. We're all technical.
Yeah. Well, and the thing was, but I was like, well, I don't code. Then say you don't code. Because you actually understand how all these things come together.
That's being technical.
And but it's because I always ask follow-up questions. Like, well, and how did that happen? And how do you do that? And
what's interesting is that we've had a number of amazing women on our show, and a number of them have started out in reporting or communications. So Melissa, I'm neglecting the name right now, but she started out and she was writing obituaries. And how yes, it was. And why that was so curious, because she's doing cyber work now. She found that she had to dive deeper into the person's life to come up with that story, to create the storyline on who they are and what they are. And she would then ask, well, they married, but where did they marry? Well, where did they meet? Right. And she would track back those things. So kind of a similar vein where you learn to ask a lot of questions. And I thought it was interesting.
That's fascinating.
Well, I think especially in the cybersecurity space, you have to ask those questions to get to wherever it is that you're going. Right. Whether it's understanding what the threat is or how the threat actors actually infiltrated the network or wherever. So I think those questions are very, very important. They're critical, actually. So, if you innately are the type to ask those type of questions, you're going to do very well in cybersecurity.
Well, and so how I ended up here was, it all ends up rolling in. And I had, I'd worked with my co-founder before, and I had, there was a problem, and there was it's because that's the other thing, you always come up with a problem. And from having that back and forth of there's this problem he keeps seeing, and because it's not only understanding it's a person, but it's not, it is actually being able to catch the attack. So, which is what you do is, I'm really happy we're here, but I'm really glad when we're done, because I have so many questions. So many questions that I'm like, when we're done, I can ask a question.
Can we cut to the question?
But, being able to, okay, how can we address so there's ransomware. So how can we address that problem? And how can we address, so anytime there's a big breach, it's like, okay, SolarWinds, like, where could we have done that? Or, I've become a groupie of breaches now, because I'm always like, and how did that happen? And, and who did what and how did that happen?
The true crime of the 20th.
So you've got your URL bookmarked to Port Swigger, and you're out there every couple of days seeing what the latest breach is.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I feel like it's very important for, as I said before, to ask those questions, to almost be like annoying with them. It's like the why, but why, like the kid, with his mom is like, why, mom, why, and so I just, my thought, I feel like women do that much better. We're okay. We're much better at asking the questions, and we're not afraid. And Chris, you and I were talking about it before. We're not afraid to say it. If we get to a particular point where, we need to get answers, we need to know something, or we need to, get our feelings known. We're gonna ask the questions.
But don't you also think that, as much as I am an advocate for equality, I also recognize and actually applaud, right? Celebrate the differences and the way that women's brains tend to work and the way that men's brains tend to work. And it's not for everyone. It's not a broad brushstroke. But in generalities, women seem to be able, I've noticed in their career progressions, more women being in the data analytics area, more in the database and the data organization, because there seems to be this way to see all of the marbles and start to form them into something that I don't necessarily, maybe it's pattern finding. I'm not sure. But I seem to notice that more with women than
that would be my career progression. And and even though it hasn't been in data, it has definitely been and how do all the, I always describe it as like I'm fascinated with you, like you do this and this happens. You do this and this. Oh, so that if I put these things together and it is,
then what?
And that is exactly that's how ecosystems work. That's how, that's how you grow a business. That's how you find, in fact, the other piece of that ends up being with threat intelligence, and it's fascinating to me about what you do, is because I really think that we're at a point, and we've been past this point of it's life critical that governments and corporations work together, because there are, whether it is hospitals, whether it's infrastructure, it's whether it's toppling of governments, that without them working together, we're at a critical point now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those partnerships are so important. And I wanted to follow up on what you were saying about how women contribute in very different ways. Something that I've observed in threat intelligence is that myself and some of my other female colleagues, the analysts, we tend to follow our intuition and our instincts in our investigations. And sometimes I just can't put my finger on what is pushing me towards this angle. And a lot of the gentlemen I work with, they're more logical about things, which is very useful in its own way. But sometimes they're like, but how did you even know to look over there? And I'm like, I don't know. Something just told me, don't stop here, look over here.
See, in that same vein, I don't think it's that men don't think that. I think they tend to dismiss it, where it gnaws at us. There's something there. I think women are very logical as well, but maybe we are less about streamlining the process and following that decomposition of information, and more about why did it go here? Back to what Charlene said earlier,
trusting your gut.
Asking the whys. Asking the whys.
Trusting your gut that's exactly how I describe it. Just trust it and go with it.
Yeah. Every time I don't, I always end up regretting it.
Yeah.
There's always something that comes back. It's like, why didn't I?
That becomes a really handy tool if your spouse or your partner agrees with you that your spider sense is usually right, because every once in a while, hopefully he's not listening, you can say, no, my spider sense says, and he'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess we shouldn't do that.
Right. It probably saves you a whole lot of money in the long run, too.
Or the other.
Yeah.
That I just spent a lot of money and you're not going to get angry about it.
So I'm very interested. I just, obviously cybersecurity is such a fascinating area. And I'm interested in determining, I mean, both of your paths seem very almost linear when it comes to cybersecurity, but really, what was it about it that drew you to it in the first place? Whoever.
I think for me, I started looking at where is intelligence going. Like military intelligence is what I worked in before, but I wanted to expand. And I knew at the agency, they were really building a big cyber program. Back then it was 2009, 2010. And I thought, okay, if they're doing that here at the agency, what's going on in the private sector? So when I started looking for a job in the private sector back home in Dallas, I just saw cybersecurity jobs everywhere. But at that point, threat intelligence was kind of just getting the ball rolling. Like, I'm not going to say it was brand new in 2015, but it was like 2010 through 2015. It was new. And I thought, man, I need to jump on this. Like, this is where we're going for Intel. It's going to be all digital. It's going to be cyber. It's going to be hacking. So I thought, you know what? I don't consider myself good at math or science. So I was kind of doubting myself getting into the field. But I sat down with some fellow military veterans who saw my resume and they said, if you can learn Chinese, you can learn cyber. And I was like, thank you guys for having confidence in me. And that kind of boosted me into the industry.
I think in my side, it came from being in the technologies and going like, part of the thing, I mean, I live in the Bay Area, and part of the thing of seeing so many different technologies is that sometimes there are technologies that do things that sound cool, but I'm like, but what is it actually solving? And so it was that part of I want to work on something that makes a difference. And it's one of the things about jumping from being being executive in a company to being a co-founder is that it's like, well, what is it really solving? And there's a few reports that come out every year, one of them being the IBM one. And, 3 years running, it's been a longer amount of time. So it's, on average, 287 days to detect and fix a breach. I'm like, that's a big problem. That's a big issue. And so like, how do we make, if I can make a difference in that, that's significant. And so if I'm going to be in technology, I want to be in technology that I know is actually solving something and not
vanity. It's not vanity.
Not vanity. And I understand, make somebody's life easier. Yeah, there's a market for that. But like, in the end of the day, like, what will matter to governments and healthcare, like those things matter to me.
Making a difference.
Yeah.
So what you guys both are doing is making a difference. I mean, at the end of the day. So, I mean, you.
But we're doing it in like fantastic nail polish.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, her fantastic nail polish.
I kind of keep coming back to this core idea that women bring empathy. We bring these kind of softer ideals to technology and to cybersecurity, things that traditionally maybe weren't considered a positive, a benefit, but I think has enriched the areas so much. And frankly, when we don't have that level of the feminine intuition, the gut checks, the understanding and wanting to make the world a better place. I when we don't have that, I think we really are missing something.
Well, it's necessary, though. I think we forgot about it for a while. I think pre-pandemic, at least I'm noticing it here even, men and women being much more empathetic to one another, giving each other grace. You'll see somebody you haven't seen for a while and they're like, you're surveying, can I hug them? Mask on, mask off. What's their safe space? But where I'm going with that is, I think that we forgot about humanity. And women were not, right? If we look at the progression, male-dominated workforce. So they've got their command and control structures in every business in every way, how they have departments oriented, right? Everything in a hierarchy, a really regimented hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And everything got really messy and everything got really difficult. And we tried to scale those things. And command and control works on the battlefield. It doesn't work for software. It doesn't work for cyber. It doesn't work for all the other things. I think we're at that inflection point that the pandemic, as well as the technology spinning so fast forward, kind of forced us to take a pause and say, hey, we need to be thinking about the humans. The
human element.
The human element.
I definitely agree with that, but I don't think that being empathetic means necessarily being not being strategic and not being soft. I think that it actually comes back to everything you said about it. It just, now let's flip it, and it's all relationship.
Yeah.
And understanding how those relationships. So one of the things we were talking about earlier was about I have an annoyance when it comes to ready for something like not to stop a sentence. I have an issue with diversity and inclusion programs because when they are all focused on how do we let's go to the universities. And I think we should bring people in to be able to have people come in, but you need to be able to have a path. So what I really get annoyed about is that people give lip service to that. If I have one more person who tells me how, we're trying to embrace having, giving more funding to female stuff. It's not you're doing me a favor. We all know that there's better outcomes if you have a diverse executive team.
Period.
Mm-hmm. So if you have, and that's it, but it's not just diverse. Like there's a tech company that had this leadership page that I used to do presentations and show them. And it was, here's a test for all of us. It was all white men, one female. What was her role?
Chief Marketing Officer.
No,
Chief People Officer.
There she was. She was because if she's not marketing, she has to be PR. Mm-hmm. And they had this leadership team, all white, and then you went to their career page, and it was like, oh look, everyone else can be here, and it was, and they're talking about how much they support a diverse culture. I'm like, no, you don't. Look at you.
Mm-hmm. Leadership matters.
Mm-hmm. Leadership matters. Absolutely. And so don't tell me you're doing us a favor by allowing a woman in the room when the fact is the woman in the room, because there's a different perspective, or because and they may be looking at the different relationships.
Well, it's actually becoming a strategic advantage.
It is.
So exactly. I hate to put the non-human spin on it, but it's actually a strategic advantage to have diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm. But I actually think but that's my point. I mean, it is. It is exactly that. It's a strategic advantage.
But I think that's what's driving some of the JEDI, the Justice, Equality, Diversity initiatives. I don't think altruistically, I'd love it to be that we've all had a change of heart and we're now embracing all of this. I would lay a penny down and betcha that some of those are being driven more by a bottom line or a way to attract somebody, or that we're getting better product out.
I want it to happen anyway, and for as much as I want it to be for the of the good heart, the reality is I don't want somebody taking credit for it. And because when times get tough, then those are the things that drop off.
Oh yeah, muscle memory is strong.
So let's focus on what's going to actually fine. This is what's going to move your business forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I my big pet peeve is being the token woman. So the token female. So I get to moderate webinars. I get to be like the face because I'm the face. I'm the female. I'm the face of diversity and inclusion, and it's
Does it mean that you're any less though? It doesn't.
No, but
it's still frustrating.
But it does send the wrong message. Mm-hmm. If that's the only reason why I'm being chosen for something, I say no. I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. You choose for me as a person. Does that mean I should turn down the email that I recently got that said we're looking to make our panel more diverse, and we thought of you? Really? Really? Right. Does that mean that you thought of me when you were picking the topic? Right.
Right.
You thought of me as
who are the experts on this topic? Did you think of me, or
did you say, that looks pretty cisgendered? Might need to change that. Let's call it Trace.
That's true.
Yeah. So, I hate the lip service. I hate the, we're very, we're all about gender equality, parity. We really, we're this, and then actions speak louder than words every single day.
Yeah.
And so,
But if it's, as long as you tell me what your intention is, I'm going to be okay with the honesty. So if your intention is, strategically we need to do this. This is a good business practice. Well, I'm at least going to give you a little bit of respect for having told me the truth about it. I saw something interesting. I can't remember if it was on LinkedIn or on Twitter, but it was a meme that said, "Don't tell me about your diversity program. Instead, just give me your data."
oh yeah, I posted that.
It was wonderful though. It was give me your data.
Yeah.
Show me the salary ranges. Show me comparatively. Show me your women hires and your male hires. Show me your
Length of service. All that.
Show me all that. I just want your data.
Yes.
And people are pushing back on that. Companies are pushing back on that whenever they hear about it.
You know why I came to Recorded Future 2 years ago? It's because I knew I was being underpaid at my other company. And some of my colleagues were like, you should be making more than that. And I was like, thank you for letting me know. And then when I came to Recorded Future and I said, I'd like to make at least what I'm making at the other role with bonuses included. And they said, oh, that's not enough. We're going to pay you more than that. We're going to pay you what you're worth. And that blew me away. I was like, wow, they didn't have to disclose that. They did it on purpose to let me know as a woman, you're being underpaid and you're worth much more. We're going to pay you what you're worth. That was so impactful.
That's a company you want to stay with.
Absolutely. There were other options. I thought, nope, I'm going with this one because I feel valued. Yeah.
And that in that case, this is a case where money talks and it speaks the right language. If you've got a company that is willing to tell you you're not being paid enough, we want to, we respect and we value you, and we're willing to up the ante, even though we know we don't have to, because we know what you're making now. We could completely under.
We get underpaid.
Right.
But we're not gonna. I mean, that speaks volumes.
It takes guts for a company to do that, for HR to be honest and transparent and to say, hey, males in your role make this much more, and we think that you're worth that. Oh man, that's the change we need.
That was so one of the things because I obviously went a different path than you. One of the things that I was always sensitive to was when I was starting out and this is the thing with intuition, was that I didn't take the roles that I was offered that I didn't think would help advance my career. And so there were things that were, when I was first starting out, you come out of college and they're like, oh, we call it an executive assistant, but really, no, I'm not going to take that role. And, or I had people who would be recruiters who would say like, oh, it's a director role. And I know you're saying a VP, but, it doesn't matter here. It may not matter here, but it matters to the next place. Sure. And I always thought about like, I'm not going to be in this place forever. So I need to actually get a title that I had one job early on where it wasn't an executive assistant, but it was a role that the job title wasn't right. And so when I went for the next job that actually reflected what I was doing, they're like, it's a shame that you had it listed as demand gen when really you were doing all this. And it was like a much bigger role. And I was like, oh, okay, I've just learned a lesson I'll never forget. And so I always made sure that everything I did, the title reflected what I was doing. And I may be wrong, but I always assumed that part of that was coming from the fact I was female of, there was the push more of like, you should be fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
Just accept it. It'll be okay, honey.
Yeah, that never seemed to work with me. Amazingly, it never seemed to
work. Oh, that honey.
Yeah, honey.
Sweetheart.
On there?
but I think it also, to your point though, it's also degrees, right? So you could be a C-level exec at at a small business, the kind of on the low end of the totem pole, or you could be maybe a step lower from a title perspective, maybe move on to into a VP role at a company that is 3 times the size.
Right.
That might not sound at first, it might not sound like a step up, but it really,
most definitely is a massive step up.
Yeah. So, it's sometimes that doesn't come through though. If you're just looking at a resume and you're like, oh, well, you were a CMO and now you're a VP of, sales enablement or something like that.
Most of the times I would think that I would hope the person who's hired would be able to see that part of the organization.
They're doing their homework too. A little bit, not a lot of homework, but a little bit of homework. Google 2 of the last 3 companies. Google the last 3. Oh, that has 300,000. Oh, that has 10. Okay, well, there's
right.
Yeah, but I think just innately, sometimes when we think about roles and titles, having a particular title, no matter what size company you're working for, it's a great thing to have. And then you move to, you're like, oh, I don't know, I was this, but now they want me to be this. And even though it's a much better and it's a better fit, it's a better job, it's a better company, do I really want it? Because maybe it looks like it's a step down. And
I think it has to do with, is it what you want to be doing?
Yeah.
So if I were I spoke with a candidate recently who she has a background in data scientist and as a data scientist, and she is looking at being in a different role. And so not necessarily a step backwards, but a step sideways. And I think that, knowing like, oh, well, this gets me into doing X. Yeah. And I think that that's still, as long as it's on the path. And I think that's the important thing is as long as it's advancing what you want. It doesn't have to always be your career, but if there is a certain career you want, then make sure that what you're doing advances your career. I did a lot of hopping around technology wise in the beginning because I wanted to learn, because I'm curious. Most of it, I wanted to learn the latest
questions.
Yeah, I wanted to learn all the different technologies, and so it was always like, what's the cutting edge? What's the cutting edge? And so I took in the beginning lateral moves because I wanted to learn the different technologies.
Yeah,
that's a great way to approach a greater understanding and really honing in on what you really love doing. Finding your finding your spot. Finding your joy, basically.
I believe strongly in that. I always tell people life's too short to stay in a role that you're either unhappy in or it's not leading you to where you want to go in your career. And that means we have to map it out too.
Right.
Have an idea of the direction you're going so you can make strategic moves. It's important.
I was asked a question earlier today, and the question was, what would you tell your younger self? And it was fairly open-ended. But what I found myself, I was thinking, well, at what age? Like, which younger self am I talking about? But if I were to look over the last maybe 15 years and say, what would I tell my younger self? It would be to lower my pain threshold. Because I got a pretty high pain threshold. And there are times where I just kept fighting the good fight. And I was doing the right things because I was honestly wanted to make a difference and wanted to change something. And maybe I can fix this toxic situation. Maybe I could do that. So when I think about some of the things you're talking about, my younger self would say, oh, well, that's a little selfish to run after that. You've got something to fix first. So I like where you're going. And I like your advice to folks is don't have too high a pain tolerance. Yeah. Allow yourself to not be in toxic situations or in places that don't bring you joy.
Absolutely.
So where do you guys think, and this is maybe an existential question, but where do you think we're headed, particularly in IT and cyber, as we do see more equity and parity and diversity for the sake of being, let me rephrase that, not because we're female, not because we fit in profile, but because we are very competent, and we're very knowledgeable, and we bring so much to the table. And I honestly believe that we have a lot of work to do, but there are a lot of organizations that do recognize the importance of having a diverse and equitable workforce. So where do you, Chris is giving me the look. Sorry. Go ahead.
Workforce, not leadership. Like that is, I agree. And I will say that I think it is a testament to the women who are in that diverse workforce. It's because of the skills of people like you who, like, you can't keep somebody like you out. Not your company was right. You couldn't keep somebody like you out because you are doing
good
quality product.
Mm-hmm.
That is not reflected in the leadership.
Okay.
I one of the things I mentioned before is that I'm a member of a executive group that talks to an expert group that talks to trying to do this without saying anything. So we'll go with, I'm a part of an executive group that a group of experts. I'm the only female. That was the point I was getting to. I'm the only female in cybersecurity.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm not the only expert. I'm really not.
You're not the only female in cybersecurity.
I'm not the only female who's an expert in cybersecurity.
Are there any more seats at the table where you can bring somebody else along with you? Can you reach back and bring the next gen?
Well, yes, but I just found that out. That's why I'm having this indignance.
I got it.
Because I just found that. I'm like,
seriously? The only one?
Yeah, that was
exists still?
Yeah, and that type of thing is so. I think that what's disturbing to me about cybersecurity is that I think that it has more, as opposed to other types of technology, has a more diverse work base.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't see it at the top.
Okay.
And I think that is personally painful for me.
Yes. But I think that's universal. I don't think it's in cybersecurity specifically. I think it's in all areas.
It is in all areas, but cybersecurity should be better.
Absolutely, and you are absolutely right. I talk to people in cybersecurity who don't fit any profile whatsoever, and they're amazing people, and they bring so much to the table. But you never hear about them in leadership positions. They hit that glass ceiling. And they've gone as far as they can go because, for whatever reason, the upper management doesn't think that they, reflect well on the company because they've got pink hair. No offense. I love your hair.
It's okay.
But
it's okay. It's keeping me out of the C-suite. I know.
There's always a reason. You don't fit that profile of an executive, and I think that's wrong, and that really has to change. But I also think that it's everywhere. It's not just cybersecurity.
Oh gosh, no.
No, but this is where I am right here, so that's where I'm going to be. More right here.
I currently work for a company with many women in leadership roles at the top, executives. We call it the circle of trust. But there are so many women in those leadership roles, and I see the real life impact in the company. And, even our CEO, who's a man, has set goals like, hey, we want more women in this company. How do we make this happen? Let's refer women in. So many smart, qualified women out there, refer them into these jobs. We're at 27% right now, but we're working our way up. And it's really amazing to see what kind of an impact these women in leadership have in the company. And it trickles from the top down. We feel supported, we feel seen.
You also have an ally there. Your
Absolutely.
CEO is truly being an actual ally.
Yes, Christopher is a great ally. Yeah. We're really, really lucky to have him in a leadership position. And maybe it's a cultural thing too, because Recorded Future was founded in Sweden, and they have a much more progressive, future forward looking, worldview on gender. And just having their perspective on things is really helpful too. Sometimes they think of things that I wouldn't think of. And it's kind of like mind opening, mind altering,
Yeah, it's like if you've never traveled the world, then how can you view? Yeah, how can you have a world view?
Yeah.
How can you see the way that other people live and how they think and how they come to the conclusions
the old
that they
statement, the books you read and the people you meet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that can only be accomplished by getting outside of your house, getting outside of your normal world.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I used to be one of those political science nerds that watch C-SPAN all the time because I didn't like watching my news filtered through somebody else's views and opinions. I'm like, I just want to see the Senate hearing and decide for myself. And I noticed during one of the Senate Intelligence Committee meetings, there were no women in that committee at that time when I was a teenager. And I was sitting there watching it with my dad, and I'm like, Dad, why are there no women in this committee? He said, I don't know, but you should go change that. And I'm like, well, I'm not into politics, but I'll do that in other areas. So when I got into cyber, I recognized that all of the people on stage speaking at conferences were men. Mm-hmm. I'm like, why are there no women on stage? And, Dad's voice came in my head. If you don't like it, go change it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been sharing with women all over the world is if you recognize a gap and you want to create more equality, set the standard. Mm-hmm. Go jump up there, learn how to do public speaking, learn how to code, bring your perspective into it, fill that gap.
That's great. It's interesting because a lot of times still, it took me a long time for me to actually kind of see the world a lot more unfiltered. Mm-hmm. I still, have times when I'm looking at a panel or I'm watching something that is male dominated. It doesn't even occur to me that it really shouldn't be that way, just because I'm so
it's ingrained. You were exposed to that, desensitized to it.
No, go right ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's a panel that I did at it was AI related, and I started off by the guy who was doing the facilitator was great, and he'd interviewed us ahead of time, so he'd asked somebody a question. And then afterwards, like, Kristen, what do you think? And I said, oh, thank you for asking. I thoroughly disagree. And I gave my thing, and I ended up being the voice of a business view. Mm-hmm. And somebody said to me afterwards, like, and you were the only woman on there. And I was like, oh, I was the only woman. Like, it didn't occur to me.
Huh.
And in fact, honestly, I got hung up on the fact that I was the only one who didn't have a technical background. So I was like, I was throwing out my strength. My mm-hmm. strength was like, well, let's look at it through my lens. Mm-hmm. And it didn't even occur to me. I'm like, oh, I was the only woman, huh? I don't know. That just happens so often. I don't even think of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what we need to do to change that beyond just getting us up there and doing it. Mm-hmm. And frankly, again, it shouldn't be we need more women on a panel because it's all white males or whatever. It really should just be, I want you on my panel because you have a particular strength that mm-hmm. you bring to the...
What I have started doing is when I'm asked to be on a panel and I ask if they have other openings, and I'm like, oh, have you thought about... And they happen to be mm-hmm. other women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Networking and making the connections and, again... lifting each other up.
Quiet way to do it too. It isn't as like sometimes folks can be affronted, like, oh, you don't have enough diversity on this panel. Well, then they're gonna kind of put their hand up a little bit and like, but that's okay. Do you want to be on the panel or not? But your approach is, are there any other open seats? Because I really have an expert, I think, that would really benefit this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So we're running out of time. I think we only have about 5 minutes left. So I kind of want to open it up to you guys. Tracy, do you have any particular questions or anything that you want to... how's the show been for you? Because you've been running around
around crazy. We have a book that was published, Reinventing Cybersecurity, and it is all women and non-binaries. And so we had book signings for that and some live streaming about it. So that's been exciting. But this is my first RSA. So I've been so many other conferences for the last couple of decades. But this is my first, and it has a different feel to it. Mm-hmm. And I've been in conferences where there've been cyber before, but it has a little bit of a different feel to it this time. But I noticed on the agendas, there are tracks around human element, mm-hmm. around not using jargon, around diversity. Was it always that way? Have you guys been at RSA before? Is it something that's always been there?
Well, I will say that the leadership at RSA is very female focused. And so, again, really reflected in the agenda.
Absolutely.
We're not talking about, ways to detect ransomware. I mean, we are talking about that, but
But
it's also, exactly,
conversation.
there's a real kind of emphasis on the softer skills, if you will, or the softer subjects of cybersecurity.
Or maybe we could say well-rounded.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, it really does reflect. And but it wasn't always that.
Yeah, one thing I noticed this time, as opposed to a couple of years ago, is that there are more female speakers and there's more female sales engineers in the expo hall.
Interesting.
So when you walk up to get a demo, it used to be majority male, and now I've got my friend Larcy's out there as a sales engineer now, and all these females doing these very technical demonstrations.
Through the expo and look for that.
Yeah.
Because as they were getting set up last night, they opened at 5:00. I did like a spin through about quarter of. And it still felt as though there was a woman organizer, and the troop of fellows around them. So, but that might have been me seeing it that way with my own bias. So.
That's true. That's true.
So, how about you? How about your experience at RSA this year?
I used to send people to RSA and only came once before, as far as like actually being here. So I will say I've done the drive-by downstairs, and it actually did seem more similar still. I think I have a different lens on it, though, right now. I think where I'm seeing it's interesting. I understand about like the organizer. Where I'm seeing I haven't seen the female SEs. What I have seen is the data scientists, because as people are bringing data scientists to events, the very large portion that is female in the data scientists, it goosebumps, absolutely. And I think that this is the whole thing of us talking about like what's pushing so much female forward is that's part of the thing of like good data scientists, like could be male, could be female, and there's a lot of really good female data scientists.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I saw a bit on the floor that I hadn't seen in other shows.
That's great. That's great. Charity, what about you?
Oh man, I'm having so much fun.
Yeah.
I love this. I'm an extrovert, so I thrive on this social time. And this time it just feels electric because everyone's so excited to be back together again. It's like a reunion in the threat intelligence community. We've all been doing virtual presentations for so long, and you see people, but when you see them in person, there's just something about, hey, give me a hug. It's been so long. So I love the atmosphere right now. Lots of great threat intelligence presentations we've been sitting in on. And one thing that I've noticed is different is that public-private partnership. We've got people here from NSA, FBI, CISA, government and intelligence agencies around the world speaking about the importance of these partnerships. And I love that because in the past it was kind of hit or miss. Some of them were a little hesitant to come out and get involved, but it's just
an imperative now in a different way. We can't sit idly. We can't just say, government, go figure this out. Or industry, you can go have your smart stuff going on over here and make a gob of money.
Yeah.
There has to be that public-private partnership if we're going to survive now.
I love it.
It's the only way we're going to be able to move it forward. So
yes.
I want to thank all of you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Charity, and Chris, and Tracy, as always.
So nice.
Thank you, darling.
So awesome. So, and I do, I hope we can continue the conversation even well beyond today's episode. So thank you both again for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure having the conversation. All right, everybody. I think we have one more interview left, and then we're going to close out day one of TechStrong TV live at RSAC here in San Francisco. So please do stay tuned. We'll be right back.